All right. I believe this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and sizes and persuasions, welcome to another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka Some Gadget Guy, the SGG of this terribly named podcast series. And I'm going to be a little off my game just for the first couple minutes here. Restream has done a total redesign of their streaming software, and it's little things like it's really cool, and they give us better tools for making like inserts and animations and things happen. I'm not doing any of that because I'm real good at the podcasting, but they do things like tuck away like audio levels. So for live streaming, audio has always been the bane of my existence because we don't have good like input output routing. I can listen to my own mic feed, but it doesn't resemble anything at all what you might hear on the stream. So apologies up front if stuff gets a little weird, just because I'm not used to looking for things where they've put them now, and I can't even see levels unless I'm like holding my mouse in one specific part of my screen. So we're going to kick right off with a fanfare of glory where I still don't have a working soundboard. Agree what I'm going to say? Audio issues, bane of my existence. One Mr. Barry Johnson hooked me up with this really cool Stream Deck, and it was working for a while. And then in trying to make interviews happen, it stopped working. And then I just never really got back to putting it together again. But one Mr. Simon Says Hypno has subscribed with Prime on the Twitch, subscribed for 40 months. 40 months. It is amazing seeing just like how many friendly faces have been a part of this chat and a part of these conversations for years now. So, Simon, you get the terrible acapella. So thank you so much, everybody who is supporting the stream and supporting your favorite YouTube content creators, and just again showing up to have these kinds of conversations where we can dig in a little deeper. It's not just getting outrage baited on social media, looking at headlines, but just kind of digging through some of these news topics and trying to sort out how we feel about a lot of these news stories. And Diago has also mentioned that the sound seems normal. I seeing some freezes on the video, and the audio has been uninterrupted though. Okay, so again, thank you. There's nothing I can do. Al Sabakli, now you have to run the stream for at least 40 more months. Nice move, Simon. We were in the pre-show in the live chat, and we were just talking up a whole bunch of like TV and stuff like that. A lot of jokes about my stream versus Better Call Saul and Breaking Bagnell. But we have a lot to dig into, and again, it's just interesting how news and product announcements kind of cycle through each other. And this time of year last year, I was swamped with new gadgets to review. And it had been a wind sprint. Like we went from the beginning of the year through the summer, and stuff kept coming out through the summer. Then in back to school, stuff comes out during back to school. And then we hit Techtober, and there was like a whole series of other product announcements and stuff. And like I said last week, it actually has been kind of nice getting to circle back a bit, cover a few accessories that I normally wouldn't have had time to cover on the channel. I'm trying to do a bit more follow-ups and comparisons, things that I've kind of let slip over the last couple of years, just as we've been ratcheted by terrible YouTube algorithms. And it's just been refreshing to have a little window. And I know we're going to hit the holidays and things are going to go crazy again. And for this year, it seems like everyone just wants to be affiliate marketers, right? It's like we don't really care if you have opinions on our product. You will say nice things about it, and then we'll give you a link, and people will buy our product off of your link, and you get a cut or a commission from that. And that's not really why I set up my YouTube channel. So no, we're not going to play that game. I'm going to take a drink of coffee here real quick. Oh, Simon Says Hypno, when you play the game of phones, you won or you die. You won or you died. I mean, you make them both past tense. All right. So I hope everybody had a lovely weekend. We are full on birthday month for Lex and Marie, and so we got a little group of friends together for Lex, and we went and saw The Wild Robot, and I had all the parent feels. A really sweet movie, very charming, and kind of a refreshing change of pace from a lot of the Illumination and Pixar style movies. Um, not to spoil anything in the story, if anyone wants to catch The Wild Robot, it is a charming movie, and I would really recommend people try to catch it. But it opens immediately into the robot's discovery of its circumstances. A robot is washed ashore on this wacky little island and immediately starts encountering critters in nature, and it's like conflict, but it's not like spelled out. This is what's happening. It's like the movie takes its time in that first couple minutes to let the audience sort of discover with the robot what the heck is going on. And it's just been a part of so many conversations lately, where I'm not trying to completely revive a movie reviewing career, but just as I catch movies, and often it's now I have to wait until a movie hits streaming before I feel like I can really watch it and talk about it and sort of share that experience. So I'm not on the pulse. But it just has become such a consistent complaint of so many properties. Okay, this is we're gonna use this to awkwardly kind of transition into housekeeping. And one of the things that I just felt compelled to write about is Marie and I finally saw Beetlejuice. Again, I'm not current, I'm not on the pulse, but it was one of those movies we were really looking forward to. The cast is amazing. Beetlejuice is a film property that is near and dear to both my and Marie's hearts. She's not super into horror, but she loves eerie, spooky, funny tension. Like she loves the show Ghosts. And especially the British version. Ashia likes the American version too, but the British version is shot kind of like a ghost horror movie. But the tension that builds up is often released in a way that is more comedic. And she loves that kind of dichotomy because the show will take its time to set up these gags and then they pay off in really funny and unexpected ways. So we got to see Beetlejuice, and I wrote up my thoughts a lot more eloquently on the Patreon. Anyone who wants to kind of dig through what is spoiler free, I still hold to that from my MYMHM days. I'm not trying to ruin a movie by giving you that stupid cliff notes. It's gotten even worse. I used to make fun of this like 10 years ago, where a movie review would be someone just reading the plot at you, and then they did this, and then they said that, and then this person does this, and then they go over here, but then they get the scepter, and then the world is saved. I thought it was pretty good. And like an hour long video would be like 5 minutes of actual analysis, when really it was just a video created to sort of supplant the movie. Or if you were familiar with the movie, is that you were familiar with the movie and you heard someone just telling you about the movie. And I've never understood that. It has become just a humongous industry. Same thing. Like I love creepy pastas and ARGs and stuff like that. I really love horror in all its forms. And there are so many YouTube channels that have destroyed the rabbit hole effect of finding a new video channel, and then they put up an analysis, and it's not, there's no analysis, it's just them talking about every video so that you don't have to watch it. And I again, I just can't understand. I come from a background in Hollywood, and to me that's like I would send them a DMCA request. You didn't add anything to the conversation. There was no insightful commentary. You're just cracking jokes about the production value. And then you spoil all of the important moments of the ARG. Why would anyone be okay with that? Anyway, I digress. Back to Beetlejuice. Um, so many brilliant moments that are kind of ruined by a pacing that never lets a moment breathe. And I could not understand. I Marie and I finished the movie and we both kind of looked at each other like, I mean, that was good, but it was all sort of familiar. And did you feel like anything mattered? And I don't understand all of these reviews that are just glowing over it. I understand, like, Jenna Ortega, brilliant performance. Michael Keaton, awesome. Catherine O'Hare, uh, gosh darn national treasure. Winona Ryder had a solid showing. Monica Bellucci is completely wasted in this, as is Willem Dafoe. Like, I've seen so many reviews and like articles and like, oh, and this meant so much, and this is even better than the original in important ways, and it really fails that test for me. Just like I was saying, the Wild Robot does a good job of sort of setting up the world and the environment and the stakes and what's important to the characters. And that's in a kids movie where you would think they'd be like hyper like stimulus, like just keep the kids blinking and don't let them think for a second, don't let them get distracted by their smartphones. Beetlejuice just like punches you in the face from moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. And here's another moment, and you remember sandworms, and here's another moment, and you remember. Anyway, I have my thoughts more eloquently expressed, but it's just been such a crazy turn seeing this kind of distraction filmmaking. It's like you've got to keep knocking the brain so that nothing can happen and no one can wander off and no one can get distracted. So you are the distraction. The movie is the distraction, constantly hitting the member berry dopamine release button in, and it's just exhausting. And it's so exhausting. So like that used to work for a movie if it was novel. I was talking to one of Lex's friends' dads at our little movie, and he was saying the same thing. Like, this movie was so patient with the audience, and it's a kids' movie. That's really kind of lovely. He was talking about like, oh yeah, I mean, like I can't watch movies like Black Hawk Down or Saving Private Ryan because they're just so aggressively edited that it kind of gives me a migraine. And for me, those movies are special, or I should say, were special for their time because they were unique. That aggressive style of editing was novelty. Not every movie was like that. Now a movie like Beetlejuice, where you would create tension by making sort of a spooky moment kind of build, that tension is critical. That's what makes a scary moment scary or a funny moment funny. And for the original Beetlejuice, that's why you get these lovely payoffs, and you can remember the whole movie in your brain after like one watching. I am already sort of losing my grasp on Beetlejuice. Like, if you were to ask me what happens in any particular moment, there are only a couple scenes that kind of stand out to me, and it's a shame. So I talk a lot about that on the Patreon, and I don't know. I think it's a concerning trend, and I'm hoping that another generation of horror filmmakers are going to help us evolve out of this current older director, older producer doing the nostalgia play has forgotten what really made their movies matter. I think George Lucas kind of set a trend with the Star Wars prequels that it was more important to tap the nostalgia than it was to really examine why characters did certain things. And I think George Lucas kind of lost the magic, lost the thread of what made his original movies so special. Now I'm seeing filmmakers like Tim Burton involved in these kinds of projects, kind of just going back to old tropes. Like, again, my daughter just watched Nightmare Before Christmas for the first time. That movie hits. That movie still works. That movie is pretty hardcore, and it's ghastly and it's funny and it's spooky, and she was in it. She was ready to go. I think if you don't understand your own work, but then a studio comes to you and says we want to do a sequel, and you've kind of forgotten where you were as a filmmaker when you made that original piece, you're very likely to just make this kind of surface level, shallow, vapid kind of replacement. And unfortunately, that's kind of what I walked away from with Beetlejuice. So many good ideas, so many incredible moments, just brilliant, just amazing production design and costumes and makeup, and the look of it is so wonderful and lovely, and you remember all those spooky funny feelings you had from the first, but then the story is just ground into the dirt. by this style of production. So, got a whole bunch of people here in the chat. Got Simon says, "Hypno nostalgia isn't what it used to be. It's really not. I'm nostalgic for better nostalgia." Dave Byrne saying, "Hey nerds, starting my last week at my awful job." Hey, that means Dave has had some good experiences out there on the job market. Congratulations, Dave. Really glad that you got a chance to kind of tap that job market. Kapakosh, again, this, excuse me, sorry. This is kind of what I'm talking about. Kapakosh has a comment about Beetlejuice that I'm not going to read out here, and especially, stop it, for the audio stream and stuff like that too. If you'd like to see Kapakosh's comment, you can catch the video replay. But again, it's little moments like what he's describing there that I feel let the movie down because they don't explore the things they set up and they just have to rush to the next remember moment, the next nostalgia moment. Basic Android guy saying hello. We got Jojo. Watched Beetlejuice yesterday with my son. Simon says hypno. There's that's a funny one. I'm not going to read that one either. Michael C, your puns are as spicy as Los Pollos Hermanos chicken. I like saying it like anglicized people would in Albuquerque's Northeast Heights. Los Pollos Hermanos. Used to work at a bagel shop in the ritzier part of Albuquerque. And let me tell you, there are people who would absolutely need jalapeno to be spelled with an H so they would know how to say it correctly, even in New Mexico. So let's get this out of the way here. Michael C. Sorry, Dave. Apparently, your ruse has been untangled. Michael C. Maybe it just means that his job is replaced with AI and he's no longer in the job market. So let me get rid of this right here. And let me get this out of the way there. Okay. So lots of other stuff. We've got some solid housekeeping to finish up. I know I kind of spent 10 minutes here talking about, you know, Beetlejuice. Oh, Jojo. Yeah, that one gets me too. LOL, it's like when my kids say queso grinds my gears. It's queso. So, okay, this is a tangent. We're watching the Dodgers game. We're watching the Dodgers game, and I'm texting back and forth with my mom and my dad. My mom is rooting for the Dodgers because she's Los Angelino, and my dad is rooting for the Mets because he's from Jersey. I don't know why that makes him a New York fan, but I guess it does. And Otani makes it to first, and he does like this really cute helmet tap with the first base coach. My mom texts, "Oh my gosh, did Lex see Otani on first? He just tapped his helmet against his base coach's head. I guess even professional baseball players do topes." I don't know if you know what tope is, but it's this. We love these little anticipation games with babies, right? This little piggy went to market, this little piggy stayed home, this little piggy went wee 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 wee. But the more you build that up to the last, babies and little toddlers think that's hilarious, right? Babies and toddlers love the build up and anticipation when you properly set up a good premise and then pay it off. Unlike Beetlejuice. Um, so uh tope is where you take a baby and you go tope and you sort of headbutt them lightly and lovingly, but you just sort of tap foreheads and you say tope, and again, toddlers and babies think this is the pinnacle of comedic achievement, and so my wife sees that and she goes, "Oh, how funny! I didn't know that's an isotopes thing." Because we call the isotopes the topes, right? You're just sort of abbreviating the isotopes. The isotopes are the farm league. Now I think they are the farm league for Denver, but back in the day, the Dukes used to be the team the Double A team for the Dodgers. And so, like I would go to a Topes game, a Dukes game. I would go to a Dukes game, and you could see like famous Dodgers players. Every now and then, you'd see like Tommy Lasorda just sitting behind home plate. I mean, like it was incredible. If you were a fan of baseball, and it's just hilarious that she saw Topes and abbreviated that in her head to topes, like isotopes. And we had to then kind of decipher that for my wife. Like, no, she meant like the headbutt game, not the baseball team in Albuquerque. Sorry, that didn't really pay off your comment there about queso, but just the loving sort of mistranslation of his Mexican word, Spanish phrases, and baseball teams. That kind of, again, we love playing very ghastly little games with babies. There's Lanza, Pica la Panza. Um, and again, babies love this, and it's literally Lance, spear you in the gut. But that's the game you play because babies think it's hilarious. All right. JGJ, there's an IRL Isotopes. I thought it was a joke team from The Simpsons. So whenever New Mexico gets any attention in any kind of national media, it is a huge deal because so much of the country doesn't think New Mexico is a part of the continental 48 United States. Even today, with the internet, you will still encounter these stories from like Albuquerque reporters trying to cover a national news scene, and they're redirected to international news bureaus because they're not from America. They're from New Mexico, you see. So, whenever something like that happens, like we were talking about Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul having this kind of presence in New Mexico, Albuquerqueans, Duke City, 505, they take that stuff seriously and they rally in support. The other one was I can't remember the name of the show, but it was a really good show. It was about witness protection, WITSEC, and it would like one of the WITSEC offices here in I'm in Los Angeles, in New Mexico, and people flipped for that show, and it got like, it was ride or die. You supported that show, you watched that show, you told people about that show if you were in Albuquerque. I want to say it was In Plain Sight. I can't remember the name of the show. So apologies. When that joke happened on The Simpsons, and we loved that moment for "I am the mayor of Albuquerque." There we changed pro teams, so we stopped being the farm team for the Dodgers. I think for a while we were with the Marlins, but then we ended up back Colorado, so the Rockies, and so when that change happened, I felt like they were doing a whole stadium rebuild. It was a really huge deal for the local economy. And at the same time, I thought there was a sentiment like, hey, it's time to let go of the Dukes. We've now changed pro teams. We're making this new stadium. Let's do something fresh. And the people of Albuquerque voted in Isotopes. And it was kind of a problem because they had to work out the licensing, because now there was this fictional thing that was owned by The Simpsons, and they can't just take it. They can't just have it. So there was actually kind of a problem with them becoming the Isotope. So anyway, um, sorry, I just saw Michael C's comment too. So let me chew up the rest of housekeeping here real quick before I get sidetracked again, because I'll go 20 years deep on Simpsons lore. I got a couple really special videos out for me. The first one, after the news that the Surface Duo 2 was getting its last major security patch, its last major OTA, a number of us got together. Got together. We didn't plan this. A number of us, kind of on the same wavelength, like Shane Craig, Scary if Literal, also put out like a eulogy for the Duo 2, a device with so much promise that I feel was under-supported, and it never really completely realized its true potential. So I've got my thoughts on this. And then, of course, if it's a eulogy from me, I have to go through that like explainer. So I also talk about other things in that video too, where it really bothers me how techies completely miss nuance. Like, it matters if a company is saying, "Hey, we're trying to make this, and we're using something like Android, but it's not trying to be Android," that somehow techies can't see what it needs 7 years of OS updates. And so I mention other things too, like our experiences with HTC ODMs and the BlackBerry Key 2, and just how time after time after time, techies will poop all over these products because they don't resemble the exact same kind of thing that Samsung does. And the Duo 2 was very much in that kind of ballpark for me. It was trying to do something different. It should have been graded on a slightly different curve. And instead, it just kind of got savaged by a lot of reviewers because it wasn't exactly the same as something they were already familiar with. So, a nice little send off, a nice little goodbye to the Duo 2. And then getting to spend a little time with just a monster mini PC here, the Asus Nook 14 Pro. And this one was special for me. I know the Nook 14 series has been out for a little while now, and a couple months. And this is another one in keeping with this like mini PC tradition. You take the slightly more mature, the slightly older laptop chip, you put it in a tiny enclosure, and you have a stupid powerful PC now. And the prices on these are still high, but this was important to me because this is the first Nook that I've gotten to play with since Intel retired the line and sold it to Asus. So prior to this, Nooks were made by Intel, and they were only bare bones machines, and they were very expensive bare bones machines. And so I felt like there was always this kind of comparison. You could buy a pre-built machine from like a Geekom or a B-Link or a Minis Forum or an Ace Magic or Ace PC, whatever, Ace Magician. There are like 5 different Aces that make mini PCs, or you could get the official Intel machine, but that was a higher price. And it came with differences in pros and cons and software support and firmware and component choices, blah, 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 blah. So this is the first one that I've gotten to play with now that Asus owns the line, and it still represents a difference in this market, but Asus is bringing some of that refresh to the Nook, where you can still buy it bare bones if you want a totally empty chassis and you pick your own RAM, pick your own SSD, but now you can also have them build it for you. And so I got a pre-built 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte SSD running the Core Ultra 7, the 155H. So full breakdown what it's been like to use that, and just a really important sort of transition step. The Core Ultra series has been um kind of an interesting change up for Intel. I still don't know that the part makes a ton of sense in a laptop if you can go ARM or if you can go AMD instead. I think the Core Ultra 7 has some tough competition. But when power concerns for your battery aren't a big deal because a mini PC doesn't need to be battery powered, and you can just send it all the electricity it needs directly off a power brick, it really changes up the value proposition. Because right now, I would say the top competition for a small form factor desktop PC would be something like a Mac Mini. A Mac Mini is still on an M2, and when you spec up a Mac Mini, Apple's still going to charge you full price for that. So unless you can find a really good deal on a refurb or a used Mac Mini that you know is in good condition, a fair sort of oranges to oranges comparison there, a Core Ultra 7 wins a lot of fights against a Mac Mini M2. And it does pretty well against an M2 Pro. And you can get one for like $900 less than a Mac Mini M2 Pro. So, Al Sabakli, I know it, man. Saying, to be honest, the Duo 2 hardware still looks sexy when I watched your video. It was such a good device. Just like absolutely the best Surface that Microsoft could make that could fit in your pocket. And I still hope that Microsoft will break my heart again and put uh, that they'll try another sort of Surface Neo. Remember the Surface Neo? Now that we have ARM PCs and how well the Surface Pro 11 performs, just fold that thing in half. Make it dual display, fold it in half. Give me Surface Neo now that we have these kinds of capabilities. Real quick on the Patreon, I mentioned that I did this Beetlejuice reaction review write up. I also just had a little fun. I perused our local Target, and this has just been a running joke on the Patreon, and sometimes I mention it on the Discord. But this is one of those things that wigs out Threads users. So people on Threads love to complain about me pointing this kind of stuff out. But right now, at my local Target, Apple has refreshed their iPhone 16 Pro kiosk. So you go to the little electronics station, and everyone's, who even buys their phones from a Target? That's like not even the thing. Well, it's not that. It's that this is a wealthy area of town, and this is signage. This is open advertising floor space. Everybody will see the latest and greatest. You can go over, there are working demos that you can play with the new iPhone 16. It you'll see people walking around a Target looking for cases and stuff, and this is a marketing opportunity. So right next to the newly refreshed, brand spanking new, beautiful kiosk for the iPhone 16 Pro is a busted, broken display from Samsung featuring the Galaxy S22 series. Now almost 3 years old, with broken stands for the devices that are supposed to be on display. And this is what passes for sort of real world marketing. Of course, Apple has higher mind share because if you're just walking around a Target in a really nice area of town and you happen by the Target electronics section, you're going to see this incredible new flashy iPhone kiosk, and you're going to look over at a busted broken and I guess, that just means Androids are for poor people, that they're for skeezy broke people who can't afford nice new gadgets, and you wouldn't even know. Like, you talk about the average consumer isn't going to understand that Galaxy S22 was from 2022. Like, there are techies who still don't make that connection that Samsung switched up the name on their phone so that it matched the year, right? Like, I was in a chat. What YouTube video was it? It was my Moto Edge 2022 video, and someone just had their mind blown because they made a crack like, oh, and it was so stupid when Samsung went from the S10 to the S20. And then someone else said, like, kinda, but that means that now the model number lines up with the year. And then that guy like immediately replied and like, oh my God, I never realized that. That's actually really cool. And you're like, yeah, yeah, that helps. More phone companies should just put the year as the name of their phone. So that's what we're dealing with. If we're trying to talk about good competition and a company like Samsung, we've got an article about Samsung in crisis. Samsung is in crisis and can't even live up to their own like marketing standards, their own marketing hype. That's where Samsung sold the most phones, is when they spent the most on marketing. The Note 7 exploded, and then for 2 years after that, they did a ton of damage control, and they spent roughly $10 billion a year on just marketing the brand, and that's where we got to a peak with the Galaxy S10 series selling the most premium phones that Samsung has ever sold. And now, if you go to Target in a fancy suburb of Los Angeles, you're probably going to see a busted kiosk with an almost 3-year-old poster, because it doesn't even have a working phone for you to play with right next to the newest iPhone 16. So that makes all of our jobs harder when we're trying to talk to people about good competition and good features and those comparisons and what makes an Android special, or it's just really sad. But if I mention this on Threads, you'll get a whole army of Samsung Knights. Well, this is really like a Target thing, and blah 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 blah. And then you'll get this weird like, I have to support my favorite retail brick and mortar store bootlicker who's like, well, obviously this is a problem with Samsung. I don't know why you're blaming Target. And you're like, I could just post the picture and just describe what's in the picture, and everyone's going to apply their own motive on who's at fault and what the real problem is, and how I'm stupid for even bringing it up, and how nothing matters, and how you should just shut up and like whatever it is that they like, I guess. I don't know. That's what passes for conversation on social media right now. And then, lastly, just to kind of wrap this up, we're going to be doing another one this Friday, but we had a really lovely movie night. Actually, it was a movie day. So, is one of the perks that I let slip and I really wanted to bring back on the Patreon was doing kind of a communal movie night or movie day, and everyone gets a copy of the movie, however they want to source a copy of the movie, and we all agree to start the movie at the same time, and then we hang out in a Discord chat and we talk about the movie. And sometimes it's we make fun of the movie, like we did 2 weeks ago with Radioactive Dreams, or like this last Friday we fired up Trick or Treat, which is probably the best modern horror anthology ever made. Big budget, amazing cast, incredible production design. I have a love for like the VHS films and just those really crazy, fun found footage or low budget kinds of films. But Trick or Treat represents a high watermark for um, like just production value. And the way that it weaves individual little mini horror films through one big narrative thread is stunning, and I don't know that many other films approach that level of editing proficiency, where it's not just I made a cute little horror short and then it cuts to a thread, like a backbone story, and then it goes into the next horror short. Is that they really do kind of weave through each other. And it's the most Halloween movie that I think has ever been made. It's more Halloween than the movie Halloween. So, this Friday we've got another film lined up, and this is actually going to be a Patreon, a patron request from Andrew and who else? Oh no, was it Tech Love and Mama? I can't remember who else, but two people requested some sci-fi horror. So this next Friday, I'm going to put the post up probably this evening just to say, hey, this is what we're doing for the next Friday. And then I think we'll wrap October with The Omen. So The Omen is my all-time favorite horror film. Just a really good classic. Gregory Peck. I'm a super huge nerd for Gregory Peck films, but that's how I think we're going to wrap our whole series of spooky movies for the month. And then I'd like to kind of keep this going. I don't think I can do every single Friday. Halloween is a special time of year for me, so I'm making an effort to do every single Friday. But I don't want to let movie day or movie night slip because it's just fun. It is so refreshing to just fire up a movie and everyone's in the same chat. We're all kind of hanging out and doing that together. So especially as we get into the holidays, if there are requests for holiday films, Thanksgiving films, stuff like that, I think it would be a really fun, just a really fun perk to continue. Let me take a quick drink of coffee here, and then we can get into some news. Yeah, Brian Glaze, all that money they put in marketing, yet the display in stores looking trash. And you're like, there has to be a deal or an arrangement worked out between Samsung and Target, and it doesn't even matter after a point who's paying who for what. It's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing for Target to have a broken kiosk, and it's embarrassing for Samsung to be showing off an almost 3-year-old phone. It's just gross on all accounts. And it's hilarious that people will fight over whose fault it is instead of just saying like that's embarrassing and that's not what Android is. That's what Android was 3 years ago. So yeah. Oh, Kapakash, The Omen. Nice. Oh, and good morning, Sean. My rhyming name pal, Sean in the chat. We have not spent enough of Sean's money this year. I'm very disappointed in us. I feel like we could really be in Sean's wallet a lot. Brian Glaze, do you watch David Lynch horror films? I like Lynch. Uh he so Lynch is one of those where the tension in a Lynch film ratchets me up. Like for example, I can't watch Eraserhead in one continuous sitting. it is too uncomfortable for me. And it's not that he is trying to make cringe, it's what he does makes me cringe. And I kind of love him for that, but I don't always equate his films with like an enjoyable buildup of tension and release. So, yes, I have, how do I say that? I have huge respect for Lynch's style if I don't always enjoy what he makes. So, let's get out of that, and get that right there. So, oh, Sean P, you will not spend any of my money, sir. You almost got me with your new video on that mini PC. See, what did I say last week? I told Sean last week, I'm playing with the new mini PC. I think you're gonna dig it. I knew I was gonna get close with that. I knew I was gonna get close with that. Um, and Brian Glaze, yeah, Lynch has a way of affecting you. Oh, Hard of Hearing. Loves me some Cronenberg, Videodrome, The Fly. Um, so if you want to break your brain a little bit, if you want to break your brain a little bit, it's not a good movie, but I adore. It's one of Cronenberg's first films. It might even be his first feature. Now I can't remember if it is his first feature or not. But look up Fast Company. And if you like Cronenberg, this is completely unlike anything else he's done. And it is not horror, body horror, social commentary at all. And it's hilarious. And it gives you a completely different perspective on how like Cronenberg got started. And then when he later found his niche in storytelling. So yeah, it's one of his first films and it's about drag racers. I'm gonna stop talking right there. Okay. Um, Everything that we're gonna talk about this week, all of the links, the articles, the show notes, all of our housekeeping, you'll be able to find links for everything on this week's blog post, somegadgetguy.com. I've got the full list of all the articles, and we have to start off with just a brief touch on presidential politics. And this is going to be brief because in the time I would normally regurgitate a whole explanation on an article, this is a short letter and we can just look at the letter real quick and then we can be done and we've done our politics. I know people flip out. Oh no, tech politics. How would you want to talk about politics in a tech podcast when everything we do in tech is incredibly political? Everything, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, everything in tech is politics. And you just are choosing to ignore the boot heel of trillion-dollar corporations on your neck when you choose to ignore the politics. So we're going to jump right in right here. There's been a lot of chatter about what a second Trump presidency might mean. And Trump himself at rallies is talking about revoking the licenses for broadcast stations. So the FCC had a thought on that because it's not really the president's job to revoke a television broadcast license. So this is just a press release from the FCC Chairwoman Rosenworcel on repeated calls to revoke broadcast licenses. Federal Communications Commission Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel issued the following statement today after repeated calls by former President Trump to revoke the licenses of broadcast stations for political reasons. Quote, while repeated attacks against broadcast stations by the former president may now be familiar, these threats against free speech are serious and should not be ignored. As I've said before, the First Amendment is a cornerstone of our democracy. The FCC does not and will not revoke licenses for broadcast stations simply because a political candidate disagrees with or dislikes content or coverage. End quote. I love the tone of this reply. As per my previous email, we're not going to do that. And it's just the shockingly low bar for commentary that is happening right now. When it comes to something, this should be a much bigger deal. There is a person running for president who has already been president, trying to get a second term, who is out there at campaigns and directly contacting people at the FCC to say, you need to take a television network off the air because they said something mean about me. And that we still need to reply to that. That's the hilarity and the sadness of how high the stakes actually are. That someone's bruised ego is now trying to mandate a television station being removed from the air. And that's not the craziest news story we're going to face today. I guarantee you that by the time I go to bed, something crazier than that, even in the tech and broadcast space, will probably happen. And that this is just going to kind of wash over us as we've acclimatized to the scariest and most horrific crazy that our political process, it's not even enduring. It's an unsustainable position for us to be in, and I don't know what turns the burners down so that we don't get to a full boil. It's just like, man, we keep cranking the heat and the pressure on these kinds of situations, and it's getting pretty gross. Jojo the Techie, so much for that First Amendment. Because don't you remember, like, for a lot of our tech hearings, like when we had all of the CEOs of all the major tech brands in front of, I think it was a House commission, um, all the conservatives in that commission were so concerned about like tech companies changing their search results so that conservative viewpoints weren't getting equal time, but they were the ones who gutted equal time commentary on traditional broadcast. And now they're just saying, well, like, we should be able to pull the plug on whole television stations. It's always a projection. Oh, JoJo, I've been trying to keep up, and DeSantis is just a whole other beast. Another one who, if his political career gains more traction on the national stage, that he is going to be so much more effective than Trump, which is really scary. Anyway, moving right along. This is kind of politics adjacent. Again, I'm ultimately very pro labor, so I want to bring up some of these just to kind of highlight the differences between how a company positions themselves in advertising versus how they actually treat their employees and their customers. Apple gets all this goodwill. I don't think Apple does a good job of, treating their employees well or treating their customers well. And that to me is a marketing disparity. There's this glowing image of a Disneyland Apple that they're so magical and it just works and no viruses and how quirky and cute. They're the little underdog, even though they're the biggest company in the world. That doesn't gel with how they really do business. And this is another one. I feel like it's just something to kind of stay abreast of so that we kind of have the right idea on what Apple really is. So this is U.S. Labor Board accuses Apple of restricting workers' Slack social media use, written up by Daniel Weissner over at Reuters. The U.S. National Labor Relations Board accused Apple of interfering with workers' rights to collectively advocate for better working conditions by restricting their use of social media and workplace messaging app Slack, the agency said on Friday. NLRB complaint issued on Thursday accuses the iPhone maker of maintaining unlawful work rules around the acceptable use of Slack, illegally firing an employee who advocated for workplace changes on Slack, requiring another worker to delete a social media post, and creating the impression that employees were being surveilled via social media. And again, we just recently talked about another story involving Apple where they were playing hardball against an Apple store that was unionizing. And by being in those negotiations, instead of giving that store what the workers were requesting, they gave all of the non-union stores all of those perks and then delayed that for the union store. So it was punitive. Now, I just said that. Technically, I just said something that could get me sued. It's allegedly a punitive condition. It's allegedly a quid pro quo. If you weren't doing this pesky unionizing thing, we'd be able to give you all the same perks from the other Apple stores that you asked for originally that we weren't going to give the other Apple stores, but now we gave them those perks. Now, In the most legalistic sense, what Apple did was totally kosher, right? They can handle their business however they see fit, free market, blah, 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 blah. But isn't the timing on this really interesting where they're working perks and promotions and pay increases and better benefits for all these stores, except the one that originally asked for all of those perks and benefits and pay raises? It almost seems like Apple is trying to chill that collective bargaining, and they're targeting, it seems like they're targeting the stores that are actually standing up and asking for this stuff. Now we don't know. There's no way to know. We couldn't possibly know if any malfeasance is happening or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that I know Apple is doing something anti-worker, anti-consumer and criminal, because I don't have any evidence of that. But it definitely seems like this has been a consistent track record for a company that talks about how important their employees are and how much they love their customers and how they're going to save the environment. And none of those things ever really seem to play out as true. That is the glossy shine of marketing wrapped around a $1 trillion corporation that has really been struggling to find, like, what's the next big thing, as many of our $1 trillion corporations are. And let me tell you, it's not going to be AI. So, Dave Burns, what Juan is describing will make it to Biden Harris NLRB, but Starbucks is suing to make the NLRB unconstitutional. Again, this is the process that we have in this country and how weak the power is. There's this like generational memory of when unions had more power in this conversation. And anytime you see this kind of like change in direction, this like change of balance in power, there's the potential for abuse. I do believe that in our nation's history that there have been unions that were powerful enough that they became corrupted. To look at the current job market and to look at the current relationship that employees have with their employers, and to see executive pay rates skyrocket and productivity skyrocket and profits from these companies skyrocket, but that worker compensation can't even pace inflation, to me would suggest that we are not living in an era where collective bargaining and unions are so powerful that they're corrupted. To me, it seems like they've never been at their weakest. So it's time for that pendulum to maybe course correct a little bit, because what we have for businesses is also not sustainable. If we don't have that kind of back and forth, the ebb and flow, and if it doesn't really kind of organically shift with where it needs to go, then eventually one side gets so lopsided and so top heavy that the entire system collapses. And I would prefer kind of like not letting it get to that point. That's just me. I think course corrects over time can help balance an unstable system in a much better way than just right now. It's like, can we just give rich people even more, and then maybe everyone else will benefit from that, but they won't. And then the whole thing just implodes. So it's probably not great. All right. That does it for our hardcore political chat. I feel like I did that fairly well for a usually I get a lot more rambly about that stuff. I still got rambly. I didn't say I did that well universally. I think I did that well for me. Anyway, um in other politically adjacent news, this was kind of a big deal. I was going to save this for like the end of the podcast, but I kind of want to knock this out because my feelings on this are probably going to be a little controversial for other techies, where I kind of want something like this to happen. And I don't want it to just happen to Google. I want it to happen to all of our big tech players. I think the company that really is most in need of this kind of regulatory scrutiny and possible fracturing is Amazon. Um, but if it happens first with Google, I think that's a good trend to start. I think it needs to happen with Apple. I think it definitely needs to happen with Microsoft. This is something I was a big At the time, I was a little anxious about the way she was talking about it, but over time, I've become a much bigger supporter of these kinds of plans from politicians like Elizabeth Warren. Now I'm really gilding the lily. This is the official reply on the Google keyword blog. DOJ's radical and sweeping proposals risk hurting consumers, businesses, and developers, written by Leanne Mulholland, Vice President, Regulatory Affairs at Google. The U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ, today shared a broad outline of radical changes it may demand as part of its lawsuit over how we distribute search. This is the start of a long process, and we will respond in detail to the DOJ's ultimate proposals as we make our case in court next year. However, we are concerned the DOJ is already signaling requests that go far beyond the specific legal issues in this case. And ultimately, what this kind of breaks down to is the DOJ requesting that components of Alphabet's business get split off. And two of those in particular would be Android and Chrome. And I'm kind of in favor of that. I feel if we were to release Android from being under Google's direct umbrella, it wouldn't necessarily change a whole lot. We have AOSP, that doesn't get as much attention anymore because the whole era of like flashing ROMs on phones isn't nearly as popular, isn't nearly as healthy as it used to be in years past. But if AOSP became sort of its own entity like any other Linux distro, and other smartphone companies could kind of glom onto it, make the different changes, you could have a Mint flavor of Android, an Ubuntu flavor of Android, a Fedora, Debian, like you could kind of diversify in that way. I actually think that would be a good thing overall. You would still have the Google Pixel flavor of Android heavily weighting AI. I don't think that's helping Android. And I don't think that's helping consumers. And I think it is an incredible amount of money to spend on cloud services, data centers. It's consuming incredible amounts of electricity. It's consuming incredible amounts of water for every one of these quirky, fun little interactions where your phone can kind of fake talking to you. But there's still this pressure that Google can place on all of the other OEMs for how Google apps and services are paired with a certain device, how you get this kind of official standing with Google for support, how Google can choose a primary partner like Samsung. I don't think that's good for the market. Google should make their own hardware, but then they also have this like other tier of Samsung is special, so they get incredible resources and direct support, and they get to guide the direction of where Android goes, and then everyone else just kind of has to follow on. If Google's going to make all their money on search, then I think they need to focus on making all of their money on search. And I think if you split Chrome as both a browser and an operating system, and you split Android as an operating system, this gives us that firewall of protection between conflicting business directives. The reason why I kind of point to Amazon first is I think it should be against the law for Amazon to sell their own stuff and to be a platform for other people to sell stuff, and that they can look at all of their business customer data and their customers and then use all of that proprietary information to make their own products better. Or I guess I should say to make their own products more appealing. That should be illegal. There should be a hard split between Amazon advertising, Amazon order fulfillment, and Amazon basics. They should not be able to cross pollinate because that gives them an unfair advantage in the market. Similarly, all of Google's proprietary data for search is how they fund their operation, but then they're using all of that to sort of entrench their hold over Android and Chrome as operating systems and as platforms. And they mentioned in this article, this reply, I really hope that you read through the keyword blog. It's like, oh, Chrome is like open source and Android is open source. But that's not true. They like to throw out these phrases like Android's open source. But when you're an OEM looking to use Android and Google Play services, Well, suddenly that's not open source. It's different. And Google can have requests on how you do things. Google was tagged a couple years back because they were making it unfeasible for a company to make a Google Play Services Android powered device and a fork of Android. And boy, the European regulators really didn't like that. Google shouldn't have any say over other products a company might want to make or how they might use the open source flavor of Android to build something like, an Amazon Fire tablet, right? Or a BlackBerry Key 2. BlackBerry Key 2 is not an Android device. It's just using Android as a kernel, as a backbone, as a spine for a BlackBerry kind of experience. A Surface Duo is not an Android device. It's a Microsoft Surface, and it's using Android as this core framework so that they have a mobile OS that they can put Microsoft services on. So this gets really messy and it gets really complicated, and they're not wrong. There is a risk that consumers and businesses could be harmed by some of these changes. What Google will not point to in their own defense, though, is the current market is monopolistic and consumers and businesses are already being harmed. So at some point, you say, is the potential risk for harm by dividing these companies better or worse, do we think, than breaking up a brand that is already kind of harmed businesses and consumers, made competition more difficult, and not really been living up to their standards for this kind of consumer and business relation. So I read through the Google keyword blog. Also, just kind of keep up with what's going on. These DOJ cases are now starting to have bigger and bigger and bigger potential ramifications. This to me is a much louder message than just hitting them with a $20 billion fine. Google could pay that off in a fiscal quarter and it'd be a small bump in the road. But if they lose their core Android team, especially now that Android and Chrome have been kind of merging themselves. And if that gets split off as a separate entity and a separate business, and all those people can now focus on, well, what makes our operating system the best? What makes our operating system more appealing to competitors? How do we keep Samsung involved, but then also really look at like getting Xiaomi interested in using the software? What is it that our customers and consumers really demand? Because we don't have to pin it to Google ad revenue and Google search revenue. I think that's a fresh place to put Android. And I think that could be really exciting to see what it develops into. The fact that we don't have like an Android desktop computer in any practical or real sense, I think is a missed opportunity. A real Android laptop. You plug your phone in and it turns into a computer that people can just use. Those initiatives are being handed down by other executives saying this is what we want to focus on. We've got to keep our product lines segmented so our manufacturing partners don't get afraid of competition. That seems like not making the best product they can. Instead, siloing things so that you always have to buy a phone and a tablet and a laptop and a desktop. You just need more computers when fewer computers would work just as well. I've already rambled on long enough. So, JGJ, playing devil's advocate, Costco Kirkland Signature versus Amazon Basics. I don't know what you're playing devil's advocate on. Those are very different situations. So, like, for example, I have it here right here. This is like one of my all-time favorite camera slings. It's stuck on some cabling. So this is the Peak Design everyday camera sling, right? So if you remember, Amazon Basics, through their order fulfillment, had all of Peak Design's customer data. Anytime you buy a Peak Design through Amazon, Amazon knows everything about those products, those return rates, the shipping, the distribution, the order fulfillment, everything. And then they just went and copied it. And they made their own exact bag of the everyday sling to the point where Peak Design brought it up on social media. Amazon, oh, well, we're going to pull this product before we get sued. We could really do better. We'll do better next time. But it was like, it was exact. Versus Kirkland and Costco brand, where Costco works with other warehouse and fulfillment and distributors to say, hey, we want to come up with a bourbon. And it's likely that bourbon was made by like Woodford, but they went directly to those manufacturers. I don't know what you say in the food industry. And they say, hey, we want to make something special for our customers. We want to slap a Kirkland label on it. How do we work out that deal? It wasn't that like Costco went to Kentucky and built their own bourbon distillery and copied Woodford perfectly and then sold it because they had all of Woodford's customer data, because Woodford doesn't exclusively sell just to Costco. You know what I mean? It's like, it is tangibly different. If you're trying to compare Amazon Basics, which is in a way to me, I think often just ripping off other companies based on the data that Amazon has, versus Kirkland, where Costco is going out to fulfill these food product relationships. So I don't know. Maybe other people think that that's wrong or something, or maybe I'm making a distinction that isn't as important. But to me, I feel like those two are pretty clearly different. Simon says, Hypno, all of this talk of OEMs and progress by consensus is silly. Just let the markets decide. What could go wrong? Oh, that's funny. So, DOJ. One of the reasons why I feel, and this is personal. I am making this personal. This is biased. This is my preference of commentary. This is not objective and scientific and practical and detached from my own experiences. My own experiences are, I have watched ad revenue plummet. I have watched traffic to my blog completely evaporate. No one goes to somegadgetguy.com anymore. Where I used to have kind of regular traffic and I would put a written article up there and it would get good, consistent daily traffic. Well, now Google is testing some new search results. Isn't this so exciting? You don't need to go to websites anymore. Why would you do the extra click when the information you want can just be contained in a Google search results page? And that's not stealing, except that it's totally stealing. They're stealing content from websites for their own benefit, but are you going to fight Google? Well, probably not. Unless the DOJ starts carving some of these companies up and it becomes very unfashionable to do this kind of a thing. Coming by way of Engadget, written up by Anna Washenko, Google tests feature to show full recipes in search results. And this is spot on. I know exactly what she's talking about. The first paragraph of the article. It's an experience many of us know all too well. Open up a food blogger's recipe only to scroll past a mountain of content you don't care about to actually reach the ingredients and method. Google is trialing a feature that could eliminate this step, even though it's the result of the company's own policies. Google has created this problem where you can't come up with a recipe blog and just post recipes. It's too short form, it's too specific, it's not keyword rich, you're not building in links, there's less opportunity for revenue and ads and affiliate links. Google wants that AdSense built into your blog, and Google's best practices are to say, well, you need to create value and you need to improve your time on site. And they've already lied to us for years about how their page rank works, and again, allegedly lied. Let me be legally consistent in this. But they go out and talk to publishers and say, this is what we focus on. You make this good content and you stay away from that AI. And this is what we care about. And we've devalued these other metrics. And then when the Google search parts of the Google search algorithm leaked, all of that was a lie. All of that was fake. And they were still very much leaning into the very metrics and the very stats that they said they weren't really leaning on is heavy. Grossly oversimplifying here. But because of how Google has created this ponderous food blog recipe situation, every food blogger is like, okay, well, for us to get ranked and for Google to like show our stuff and for us to show up in search and be competitive, it started with just like a little snippet, a little blurb, then it kind of became more of a story, and now you just have like pages of text before you get to the actual recipe, because Google has been punishing sites that don't live up to this kind of like page rank and time on site and these other metrics. No one likes this. I hate it. I got my I finally got a physical, as my first physical since the pandemic. TMI. But my cholesterol levels looking really good. I'm still probably 20 pounds heavier than I want to be, but I've lost weight. I'm down about 12 pounds from the peak of summer, and you just everything's like in good trajectory. I'm now just on the good side of pre-diabetic. Like progress. I'm making progress. So to celebrate, I made an Alfredo. Butter and cream and cheese. Hey, my HDL and LDL numbers are exactly where they need to be. Let me just consume milk, fat, and dairy. Um, looking up the recipe, looking up a recipe for an Alfredo. I know in my brain how to make an Alfredo, but I do like to just kind of reference or check what are some of the proportions. For example, I like a really garlicky kind of sauce, and I like to let that garlic kind of smoke in the butter a little bit before I dump cream on that. And then I always have a problem where you go just like one extra pinch of Parmesan, and then it starts turning into a fondue. And you don't want a cheese sauce. You want a nice flowing delicate. You don't want that sauce to separate. So, I'm looking up proportions and I'm running into this problem where every food blog I go to, it's like I've got 3 pages of like visiting Tuscany or going through Italy, or when I was one story was about apprenticing with a chef in New York. And you're like, this is a sauce that has butter, heavy cream, and Parmesan, and then you can add a little bit of extra, like if you want to add a little bit of basil for something aromatic. It's not going to show up much in a cheesy sauce, but you can do it. Or garlic, something that kind of punches you in the mouth. My favorite addition is adding New Mexican green chili. So you get this kind of spicy, cheesy thing going on. Delicious. It's awesome. You shred some chicken. It is phenomenal. Highly recommend. But for me, it's like a little bit of black pepper just to kind of give it something to chew on, and then garlic, and you get that smoky, garlicky flavor in it. I hate going through all of this mountain of text, but Google made these recipe bloggers do that. And they created this problem where everybody hates going through recipe blogs now. So what is Google helpfully going to do? They're going to take the recipe for you, and then you just never have to go to the websites anymore. Google hurt all of these recipe bloggers, made them create content that no one wanted to create. They just wanted to focus on recipes, maybe have like a couple paragraphs about, oh, and this is interesting, and this kind of flavor combination and palette, and pair it with this beer, and it's really interesting. And that would have been fine. We would have loved that. A paragraph after the recipe, brilliant. But that's not what Google made them do. So now Google is going to fix the problem for us by further hurting all of these recipe bloggers. And so now you never need to click on the website. You don't have to give them any traffic. They don't get any time on site. They don't get any page rank or metric. You'll never encounter any of their affiliate links or any of their AdSense ads. They're going to be hurt. They're going to be hurt in traffic, in social media shares. They're going to be hurt in monetizing their content. If you want someone who's really creative at coming up with fun recipes, gone. You never have to go to their website ever again. You just search for something on Google and they'll put up the search results, and you can just copy the recipe right from the Google search results, and everything sucks. Everything is terrible. And Google is selling us the solution to the problems that they created. So when I get really persnickety about stuff like that, because it's already happened in tech, look at all of the really reputable labels that have been in tech publishing and tech blogging and tech reviewing are now basically just listicles for affiliate links. That's because of Google. That's because of how Google search has been harming companies, and Google now AI results are just stealing the good content from these websites so that you never have to dig any deeper. I'm not upset about the idea that components of Google could be carved off. I'm not bothered if the operating system division at Google just becomes its own separate company or own separate division or gets swallowed up by maybe, I don't know, like Red Hat or something like that. Actually, that wouldn't be great. But you kind of get what I mean is I'm not bothered with the direction that they're heading is to destroy user generated content on the internet. Then something has to change because the people who actually do the work should get the credit, they should get the traffic, and they should monetize. That's always been the relationship we've had. That's always been the agreement that we've had. And Google seems hellbent on changing that arrangement and just pray we don't change it further. So, um, Michael C. Yeah, I want Google to be broken up. I will enjoy watching it smashed around a bit. uh, Ted, Grandpa would let me smell the truffles from the earth before throwing it in the pot. You're like, I don't care. And I really wish that Google didn't make you write that story because I just want to make an Alfredo. And Dave is saying this more concisely. Google made them add their life story, putting even more ads through Google Ads display networks. I actually do read the recipe pages for some blogs because they are in-depth instructions for each phase of the fish, but this is ridiculous. For me, it's really I miss when a recipe blog would kind of break down step by step because that's the important information. It's not just the ingredients and the quantities and what order. It's kind of like I'm going through this phase. Like my ramen recipe is a little busy. It's very particular. And if you do something too early, then you end up with mush in a pot. And if you do something too late, then you kind of get punched in the mouth with like flavors that haven't mixed, right? So that process is what we should be looking for. I don't understand like how people generally again, it's like it doesn't bother me, so I'm not going to care. But then eventually Google's going to do something that will bother me, but no one's going to care for me, right? It's that like I need to be the victim only when it affects me, but I can't imagine how something like this would also bother someone else. And that's like again, I'm preaching to the choir because I know we're all really good tech neighbors in this chat, but it's really upsetting. It's very disappointing that this has become so short-sighted. And I'll talk to like again, otherwise very functional adults who get through the day with their technology, my daughter's friends' parents, and then you'll mention something like, "Oh yeah, and that's how they screw you. You could just get your battery replaced." And it's like the concept is just so completely off the grid, completely foreign to them. But it's like if I don't phrase it in you are the victim, aren't you upset? Then they can't imagine how someone else would be upset by something. There is no empathy. There is only a demand for sympathy when I'm affected. And if I try to approach them, they're like, yeah, people in like downtown Los Angeles are really struggling for internet connectivity, and their kids are like in the parking lot of a McDonald's just to piggyback on the Wi-Fi. And it's like, oh yeah, well that sucks. But I mean, you just got to get a better job, and maybe you just need to move and pick yourself up by your bootstraps. But then it's like, you don't get fiber because of all of these shady deals with bureaucrats. You're right. I am the victim, and we should do something about this. And I'm gonna talk to my senator and blah 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 blah. It's like the only way I can convince someone to help someone else is if I make them the victim first. And that's horrifically sad. Um, This is just a really rough week for Google in general. It's like just point after point after point after point. But again, we talk about, oh no, what if this is bad for Google? And yet, every single time we bring up something like this would be bad for Amazon, or this would be bad for Google, or bad for Apple, or bad for Microsoft, it always seems to play out in a way that would actually be good for everyone else. So here's another one. This would be bad for Google. Google will make less money if and when this goes into effect. Written up by Android Central, Brady Snyder, Google's loss is our gain. Xbox purchases and gaming are coming to Android. And just from there, what you need to know, a far reaching US court ruling, among other things, will force Google to stop requiring app developers to use Google Play billing for Android mobile payments. Microsoft is one of the first developers to bring new offerings to Android in the Google Play Store. Now that they're opened up, you'll be able to purchase and play Xbox games on Android starting next in November. Starting in November. So starting next month in November. Maybe that's what they meant. I don't see how this is bad, except for Google. Google wants the same thing that Apple has, where let's say you own and operate this incredible infrastructure and you pay for servers and you do this incredible platform, and Apple has nothing to do with it. But just to be able to talk to iPhone owners, Apple demands 30% of everything that you do, and they won't allow you to have like alternative billing in your app. Because of EU regulations, this is starting to change. And because of DOJ cases here in the United States, this is starting to change. But just refreshing the Xbox, because this is what's so funny to me. The Xbox game app works differently if you install it from the Samsung store. If you did the Xbox game app, if you have a Galaxy phone or a Galaxy tablet and you install the Xbox game app, it's already doing what it should be doing. Apparently, Samsung and Microsoft have a good enough relationship that they could work out something else, and that it's not the same kind of punitive pricing that Google wants, where every little transaction or deal or sale or subscription they get a huge cut of. Same thing just happened recently with Apple and Patreon. Apple has nothing to do with Patreon. Apple contributes nothing to Patreon. But if you're on an iPhone and you support your patrons, your costs go up as the supporter because Apple is demanding a bigger cut of a platform and a service that they provide no value for. Literally just keeping the gate closed so that you can't easily open a Patreon app and interact with your favorite content creators. Excuse me. Which again should be really stupid. Like we've trained an entire segment of society to like look for an app when you have this thing called a browser. But because of these cases, now we're forcing Google to open up Google Play. And I think it would be really cool if F-Droid had an app that was updated in Google Play. There's no money. Google doesn't have to facilitate anything other than letting you install F-Droid. And then F-Droid has their own repositories and they do their own servers, their own maintenance. They don't have to piggyback on any of Google's infrastructure, but you could easily install another app store that gets you access to content that you wouldn't normally find on Google Play. The Epic Game Store is going to probably start expanding their selection of games for mobile. Xbox, that's really looking more like a cloud gaming play, but it's not going to be Microsoft has to pay Google for every interaction when Google provides them no value other than access to Android users. So could be another there's obviously an appeal, and Google's going to try and block this because it would be bad for them. They would make less money. I don't know that I'm bothered by that. I feel if Google wants to, you know what, go with me on a little thought exercise. Microsoft is really becoming more of a catalog and publisher. They kind of really are the Netflix of games. I'm less interested in Microsoft gaming hardware. I'm not really anxious to see what the next Xbox is going to be capable of. I mean, look at the sort of whiff response to the PS5 Pro. No one really cares. I don't really care what comes next for Xbox. I'm a PC gamer. I've really walked away from consoles, and when I do think consoles now, I'm thinking portable like my Steam Deck. And my Steam Deck's doing me fine for the games that I like to play. So Xbox is really becoming a brand name around this incredible number of studios that they've purchased and the incredible catalog of games that they have and novel ways to distribute those games. They might go to a console box that's plugged into your TV. They might go to your PC. There's kind of an Xbox flavor for PC gaming, or they could just go through the cloud and it could be a game streaming solution. If Google wants to make money in the gaming space, they're hoping all they can be is a gatekeeper. All they are is a speed bump that slows everything down and forces the platform to give them money for every purchase that goes through that toll booth. But this is like free market, right? We really care about a free open market. I don't know. Maybe if Google really wanted to make a play like this, they could like reach out to developers, maybe even pick up a couple game studios. They could build infrastructure. They could publish their own titles. Um, I don't know. You could maybe imagine because they've got so many data centers and so much cloud AI and processing. Like maybe if they made their own kind of framework where you could go to a Google Cloud game app and look at like titles and you get, oh, you're like, I really want to play this Assassin's Creed, and they have a deal with Ubisoft. So then I just, I pay for this Google Cloud gaming subscription, and then I can play this game from Ubisoft, right? Something like that. I don't know. Like you could imagine like a virtual stadium, right? And like it's like a virtual stadium of gamers that are all like connected via the cloud. And you could maybe call it something like Google Stadia. And then they would have their own gaming cloud service and they could monetize it and they could have those connections with consumers. I'm obviously being really poopy about this. It really bothers me that like Apple and Google have created this kind of strategy. um Dave Burns just beat me to the bad punchline of my horrible joke there. But they it, imagine like the classic days of Windows versus Mac and someone coming out and saying like, if you want to write software for Windows 98, you've got to give Microsoft a 30% cut. Well, is Microsoft going to fulfill a whole bunch of infrastructure for us? No. Literally, just to have a program that can be installed and run on a Windows 98 machine, you just have to give Microsoft a 30% cut. And in that era where we freaked out about Microsoft having an included web browser, regulators got very interested in Microsoft's business practices and eventually broke that open. And it allowed for more competition in the internet scene, how people connected to the internet. You would not have Chrome today if regulators hadn't taken an interest in Microsoft's business practices. But now on phones, we just take it for granted that, like, if you want to do business on an iPhone, you got to pay the toll. And that to me is horrific. And I don't understand how people aren't more upset about that kind of business arrangement and that it's completely fluid. Because I don't believe for a second that every single app is subject to the exact same kinds of punitive pricing and commissions, and some apps are better than others, right? So anyway, uh, I'm not terribly bothered by this. I think if even with some of the recent price increases, Game Pass is actually a pretty good deal, especially if you're doing like PC Game Pass and that comes with some cloud gaming. Honestly, kind of a better buy overall than like the full, console plus X Game Pass thing. Anyway, I'd love to see it. I really want to see more attention coming to mobile. And with phones that are as ridiculously powerful as they are, the gaming experience on mobile right now is definitely pacing my Steam Deck. What my Steam Deck is capable of, a current phone is more powerful. So let's do that. And let's see if we can make that even easier for developers to get on board. Let me take a drink of water here, and I got a couple comments on that. Dave Burns. I had to think really hard about what Stadia was called. Let's see. Michael C. One thing that's interesting is Google getting more scrutiny because they also market Android as being an open system. Apple is even worse than Google in a lot of ways, but they don't try to pretend to be more open than they are, at least in terms of software. Absolutely fair. Because, like, Google is really bad about putting things in writing that they shouldn't and describing things in ways that kind of mess them up. Like in very similar situations, Apple will come out better in a lot of these regulatory scrutiny situations just because they don't claim anything different. Again, if you make claims, the FTC gets involved and will sort of rate you on how you live up to the claims that you make. And Google is really bad at that game. Like Apple is really good at that game. So, lastly, for Google News, oh, and Steven, always RIP Stadia. It was an incredible proof of concept. They proved that like this was a good market, and if they had stuck with it, they would have a competitive force, a competitive alternative to Microsoft's Game Pass. And now they got nothing, and they're not going to make any money off of Game Pass. And I'm happy. They should not be making any money on Microsoft Game Pass. This is just kind of an interesting one, and I hope that this plays out. Google is preparing to let you run Linux apps on Android, just like Chrome OS. Google is developing the framework to let you run Debian in a virtual machine on your Android device. So obviously, this isn't coming like anytime soon in any kind of polished consumer presentation, but I have to credit. It was the Pixelbook Go kind of got me back into Linux virtualization because you open up a Chromebook and the Pixelbook Go is an expensive but really nice laptop, and there were just things I wanted to do with it. The mobile version of Firefox wasn't going to get it done for me. This was kind of at that transition point where we were just starting to get better Android app support, and then it was just kind of broken wide open. I can just run Linux programs on this laptop, and they run so well. It's so nice. Little Core i5, 16 gigs of RAM, just chef's kiss. Brilliant. And I've been complaining about stuff like Android apps and desktop modes, and it would just be really nice. It would just be really nice if I could plug an Android phone into a display and then say sudo apt-get update, and then I could also run something like GIMP or Audacity or any other number of programs, Shotcut, just a full-fledged desktop grade program on a phone that is already as powerful, at least as powerful as an Intel 12th gen Core i5. Like, how do we not want that? So I'm hoping that this will start to play out because what we know is that there's this merging of Android and Chrome OS. And it's really bugging me because it's like every little blog is just kind of dancing around this idea. But Chrome OS didn't work. Chrome OS is becoming a failure in the market. Having two siloed, separate operating system experiences is not sustainable. And one needed to absorb the other. And it really doesn't make any sense for Chrome to absorb Android because all the apps are on Android. It makes a lot more sense for Android to absorb Chrome, and then we just improve the capabilities of Android for the few little sticky spots that we have left, like having a full-fledged desktop browser, the ability to install, full-fledged Linux applications. Like just a few little things make Android complete. Chrome needs all of Android to be more complete. And so running Android in a virtualization machine to fill in the gaps, close up, make more programs accessible, make more apps accessible, doesn't make any sense. Chrome was always sort of the failure. So you make Chrome really just a fancy flavor of Android, and that solves more problems for most consumers. So if something like this plays out, then we still have those enthusiast capabilities, those expanded capabilities, the ability to do more with a Chromebook And no one's really going to know functionally that there's any massive difference if you swap out Chrome OS for Android and then you just make the browser a part of Android. But that could be a huge perk if you plug your phone into a monitor and then suddenly you've got terminal access and a full-fledged desktop grade web browser. Everyone would love that. So, oh yeah, Judge of the Techie, I was kind of mad when Google discontinued. Is it lacrosse? Do we say lacrosse? Lacrosse? I've never actually said it out loud. I've only read LACROS. When I understood that Chrome OS is going the Android route, it made sense. It like you streamline your development costs. You still have the exact same categories of phone, tablet, laptop, desktop. It's so much easier. And then you have one core development space. This has been like, I feel like I'm going crazy because this is stuff that we've been crying about for like years. When is Chrome going to absorb Android, or when is Android going to absorb Chrome, or is Fuchsia going to be the merging of Android and Chrome? And like all this time, Google's done this like tee-hee thing, like hee, no, it's the Chromebook and Chrome OS is great and it's good for schools, and Android is a separate thing, and we don't really have a good tablet operating system in between, but we'll work something out. Maybe it's a Chrome slate, or maybe it's an Android slate. Who knows? Tee. And you're like, just smush them together. Just put them together and you solve all their problems. It pisses me off. We're in 2024 and I might finally get capabilities on an Android phone or tablet that we should have had 10 years ago. I'm better. I just needed to get that out of my system because it's real stupid. It's just real stupid. Man, I don't know how much I really want to. This is like Juan's blood pressure podcast right now. It's not gleeful. I'm not happy about news like this. Dave Burns, 8 years ago, Juan, come on. You're right. I exaggerated and I rounded up. How dare I be a terrible journalist? Oh, Jojo the Techie, Linux plus Chrome OS. You know, I knew that, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Jojo says I don't know where the A came from, but that's what they called it. But no. I know that LACROS is Linux plus Chrome OS. What I don't know is, do you say lacrose? Like, are you lacrose intolerant, or do you say lacrosse? I just don't know physically how to make the sound come out of my face for LACROS. That's what I was struggling with. Is words are hard. Moving on. I do not like Samsung. I've had miserable experiences with Samsung PR. I feel the company is in terrible shape right now, and there's still like an army of sycophants that are only going to talk about how great Samsung is, or this is why I own a Galaxy, and oh, these are the most important things. But there is no good data to suggest that Samsung is doing well in any major endeavor that they're working on. Premium tier phone sales, not doing great. I would bet you their RAM and solid state chips, they're probably selling really well just because of how they sell to all these other companies. They're facing more competition than ever as a display manufacturer. So Samsung Display is facing a lot of tough competition from like BOE and LG Display and other players in that market. And the worst seems to be the albatross around their neck, seems to be their silicon division, where they're losing most of their massive customers. Last week, we talked about Samsung potentially shelving their next Exynos and just going Qualcomm for all their chips. And it's like it takes a mountain of evidence to eventually get some kind of acknowledgement from executives. Because for every one of these individual moments, it's like, oh, well, yeah, we maybe missed our quarterly here, but we're working on this and the outlook is positive and we're going to have the fastest chip or the best and brightest screen or the highest selling Galaxy that we've ever had since the Galaxy S10. And like, I really hate the corporate speak. So when something like this happens, it's at least an acknowledgement of the market that they're not in good shape. Coming by way of Song Yung A and Christian Davies at the Financial Times, but I caught it on Ars Technica because of their collaboration with the Financial Times. Samsung says it's in crisis, apologizes for missing profit target. Samsung has issued a public apology and acknowledged the company is considered to be in crisis following the release of worse than expected profit guidance on Tuesday. The South Korean giant reported a preliminary operating profit of $6.8 billion for the third quarter, undershooting market expectations. Oh, I guess I should do that in Yuan. It was 9.1 trillion won when they were hoping for 10.3 trillion. So 10% off the mark from what they were trying to accomplish. This is like, the first step in fixing a problem is acknowledging that you have a problem. I don't like Samsung. I think they do scummy business. I think they treat their employees poorly. I think they treat their distributors poorly. They have been known to engage in ruthless political scandals. Um, I don't think they treat their customers well. And their PR has been one of the most punitive PR companies that I've ever tried to work with. But we're tied to Samsung in a competitive market. And if Samsung is not operating at the best of their capabilities in chip fab, in their foundry work, in their memory chips, in their RAM, in their mobile devices, in their televisions, this is a major player on the global stage. This is a major component of the South Korean economy. And this is one of the main competitive consumer electronics manufacturers. We need them to be operating at a better tier than they are. And for the last 4 years, I've been pointing out a trend that I have found to be very disturbing. I've been pointing out trends that I do not believe Samsung is living up to their marketing messages. They are not fulfilling their investor concerns. They're not improving and they're not innovating. And again, they had the momentum of being a default option in so many categories for so long that they were able to coast. And this is what really bothers me. It's like the same thing that we did when net neutrality was getting bandied back and forth between liberals and conservatives. When we, at the very beginning of the Trump administration, there was a lot of joking about how they were going to gut net neutrality. We had Ajit Pai at the head of the FCC. They killed net neutrality and then immediately came out with this. Well, see, look, the internet still works fine. I can still go to my favorite websites. Why do you even need net neutrality? Because the ramifications of that play out over time. So, yes, as we saw some of these really concerning trends from Samsung 4 years ago, obviously Samsung wasn't just going to shutter tomorrow. And that's what really bothers me about the short sightedness of so many tech commentaries. They know their readership prefers Samsung. They're going to say nice things about Samsung. They're going to downplay problems with Samsung. And then 4 years later, Samsung is in a crisis point. Do you know how bad things have to be at Samsung right now for them to publicly acknowledge that maybe there's some oopsies and it's not as good as it could be? Do you know how bad things really have to be for them to come out with this kind of apology and use a word like crisis? There is an internal crisis at Samsung. And all along the way, if the journalists really had been doing their job and there had been good course corrections for bad business practices, there had been soft bumper regulations on terrible anti-consumer practices from Samsung, and that there had been better guidance on things that, like, hey, maybe don't make your products exactly like iPhones if you want to sell more phones. If we had had all of those things as consistent commentaries and conversations in place, Samsung wouldn't have been able to do everything that they wanted, but they probably wouldn't be in crisis today. You can't get a good accounting of how ridiculous and lopsided a market might be for consumers if your guiding force first is say nice things about the company that most of our readers already do business with. That's just bias confirmation. That's not good journalism. That's not good reporting. That's not good investigation. That doesn't educate a consumer base. But again, every time I criticize Samsung, I just get pooped on by Samsung Knights, right? It's actually kind of calmed down a little bit recently just because I don't think anyone, even the Samsung Knights, are really that happy with Samsung. So it's just exhausting. Now they're just over it. I'm just over that drama. I'm just over those conversations. But no, if Samsung continues on this trajectory, that is terrible for the global economy. That's bad. We don't want even more business and productivity only going through TSMC. We don't want fewer component manufacturers like I'm trying to rack in my brain who the other major players are in RAM and SSD chips. You need them to have actual competition because there's been so much price collusion. Um, Not Infineon. Is it Infineon? Anyway, um, you need to shake those markets up. If we don't have a player like Samsung actually operating well in these spaces, it doesn't help us. It actually makes it easier for the few remaining players if Samsung were to say leave, like splinter off their foundry business. Who's going to buy an underperforming foundry? There aren't many companies that are going to throw hundreds of billions of dollars at that market. It'd be more likely that it just completely fractures and that TSMC picks up some of the parts of that. We don't want all of our eggs in one basket. We want to see a better diversification across the globe so that this ridiculous supply chain that we've invented can be fulfilled from multiple vectors and that individual companies can do business and compete for other business. I really, it's such a bummer because I feel like some savvy criticisms 4 or 5 years ago would have completely headed off the near catastrophe that Samsung sees themselves in today. And now we're talking about it like, oh, who could have seen this coming? It's just kind of a shock to us. This whole year, it sounded like their phones were selling pretty good, and you're like, how do you not catch all of this? How do you not walk by a kiosk in a Target with a busted display sample of a Galaxy S22 and go, "Yep, they're doing great"? So I don't know what really digs them out of this. It's going to take bold and decisive steps to steer a humongous organization in a direction that they don't want to go, and I don't see it happening. But I really hope changes are actually affected and not just like token changes and maybe do a few layoffs and that'll help the stock price. I feel like that's what they're gonna do, but it's pretty great. Oh, Simon Says Hypno says cross platform equals la crosse. Okay, I'll go with that. Lacrosse. Not lacrose. I really like lacrose because then you can say Google is lacrose intolerant. Um, there's a lot of talk of cronuts. Let me tell you, my HDL and LDL numbers are looking real good, and I'm no longer in that crazy, like pre-diabetic space. So maybe I got to treat myself to a cronut. I should absolutely not celebrate with food when my health stats come back looking pretty good. JGJ, do you think Samsung focused too much on folding for influencers? I think in the consumer space, the thing that hurt them was not finding an exit strategy to how much money they were spending on marketing. Here's the big problem is we have created these pocket economies that are ruled by carriers. The United States is not unique to this. Every market where carriers have outsized control over consumer decision making, Apple wins. Like right now, the steepest growth in premium tier phones tends to go Apple's way in every market where the primary relationship is between consumer and carrier. So Samsung was spending an incredible amount of money on marketing to kind of smooth over the Note 7. Like you can still go to like airport information desks today and see notices about how you cannot fly with a Galaxy Note 7. Consumers don't know how many years ago that was. It's just linked in their brain. Galaxy Notes explode, as it should. That was a stupid position for Samsung to be in. And another aspect of, I feel, a cost cutting strategy as opposed to a good innovation strategy. But at their peak, post Note 7 up until around the era of the Galaxy S10, they were outspending Procter and Gamble for marketing. They were spending roughly $10 billion a year just on marketing. Obviously, that was not going to be sustainable. They were probably outspending Apple like 2 to 1 for their marketing and their messaging. But the outcome of that was the highest tier of competitive device selling at higher prices. Samsung's always made a ton of money on their like mid-rangers and entry-level phones, but for a while, the Galaxy S and the Galaxy Note were growing and nipping at the heels of like Apple. There was well, first of all, there was also just more players and more competition in general. But it really felt like from one year to the next, that advertising budget just got halved. And I feel a more graceful decrescendo of spending would have kind of acclimatized the market smoother. They would have had, I think, a more consistent presence for phones like the S20. The S21 is just a garbage phone. The S22, I don't feel was any better, but the S23 should have been a good recovery point for Samsung, but they weren't in people's faces. They weren't in people's lives. And right around that time, what do we see? We see renewed interest from Google to properly market a new flavor of Pixel. And I think Google, in their first year of really shifting up for the Pixel 6, spent over $1 billion in marketing. Whereas before, the Pixel and before that, the Nexus had always been kind of hobbyist, grassroots kinds of devices. They went hard on partnerships. They went hard on sports teams and sports placement, and then they spend $1 billion marketing the Pixel. Wouldn't you know it? The Pixel is one of the fastest growing premium tier smartphones in market share. So that to me becomes, it's not just a did Samsung focus too much on this one thing? I think Samsung let all the air out of the balloon too quickly. And I think a more measured reaction to ad spend and demographics and really keeping their fingers on the pulse of who's in what market, where do we need to spend? Maybe you can reduce in like markets like New York and LA, but we've got to hit the heartland and we've got to really go after consumers in these states. Instead, I feel like they kind of let all the air out and then they just sort of focused on key areas where they were already popular. And that again, it's almost like a political campaign. It's like you need to grow, you need to expand your audience. And what did we see for those 2 years? From S20 to S22, they lost 40% of their Galaxy S sales. And when I bring stuff like that up, everyone's quick to say, oh, but this one article said that they hit this sales peak and it was like set a new record. And you're like, yeah, so you sold more phones in this 1 week than you did the year before. You still sold less phones overall. Fewer Galaxy S22s were purchased than Galaxy S20s. That's a failure. You failed. You were failing in the market. That is an unsustainable trajectory. And I think for a lot of these markets, it's really a factor on that entire presence of marketing and grassroots and being a part of a consumer's life. Because if you can't convince someone to walk into a Verizon store and say, I want the Galaxy, they're not going to be pointed to a Galaxy. They're going to be pointed to an iPhone. And look at all of these like T-Mobile commercials up with Snoop Dogg talking about Apple Intelligence and the iPhone 16 and whoa, this iPhone's on us. Not seeing as many of those ads, not nearly as consistently for Androids, any Androids. It's pretty dire out there. From Brian Glaze, we've all been watching Samsung make misstep after misstep, and yet their C-suite is surprised that they missed their target margins. And we keep getting these like, because there was also another one. I can't remember who it was. It was another high-level executive at Samsung, and it was just like, "Well, I apologize for some of the underperforming of the Galaxy." And then the next phone came out, and it was like, it's exactly the same phone. The Galaxy S25 is about to come out. It's exactly the same phone. Oh, but I take full responsibility, and I will change nothing. What are we doing? What are we doing? Oh man, there's so many people talking about cronuts. You guys are killing me. From Diago. So, what is Samsung to change and bring new and exciting things for the Note 25? The rumors point to a new high pixel count ultra wide and keep the same model as the S20. Hold on one second. I just heard like a big thud. I'm just going to mute my mic here for a second. Sorry about that. Marie dropped some stuff down the stairs. I'm just trying to make sure she was okay. She's all right. She's talking anyway. Sorry. High pixel ultra wide keep the same model as the S20 Ultra. I pick up a OnePlus, and there is so much that you can do at competitive prices against a Galaxy, against a Pixel. I've got the OnePlus. This is such a nasty case, and I've raked my screen protector on the OnePlus 12. Um, for the first time in a while, the new Pixel has not really taken my SIM card out of the OnePlus. The OnePlus 12 at the beginning of 2024 is a competitive and in many ways better phone than the Pixel 9 Pro that was just released and is about to face competition from the OnePlus 13. And the OnePlus 12 could easily do battle for an entire year with the Pixel 9 Pro XL, and it would be a really solid head-to-head fight, but the OnePlus 12 is hundreds of dollars cheaper. And then I pick up a Vivo or I pick up a Xiaomi and I see things on those phones that we just would never get here in the United States. It's actually one of the articles. Dave Burns put this in on the Discord. Let me pull this up here as a leak and a rumor. This is coming by way of Notebook Check, written up by Habib Onawole. I have absolutely mispronounced your name and I apologize. Leak reveals that the OnePlus 13 will have an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner and cost more than the OnePlus 12. So this is not gonna be surprising. The leak reports the price. What is it? OnePlus 13 will reportedly cost 5,299 yen for the 16 gig RAM version with 512 gigs of storage. In comparison, the OnePlus 12 with the same RAM and storage costs 4,799 yen. But then they do the conversion on that. That's roughly $900. $900 MSRP for a OnePlus 12 with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. Hundreds of dollars cheaper than a Pixel 9 XL. And I love that they just kind of tack this in here. Amazon currently has it discounted for $749.99 for 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage, under $800. So, what do we know about phones coming out the end of 2024 and launching for the 2025 model year? Right, we do this with cars. Is the OnePlus 13 is not a 2024 phone. It will have launched in 2024, but it's the 2025 model year. We know that the top of the line chipsets, the new Qualcomm and the new MediaTek, are going to be more expensive. So we know prices are going up on components. We know it's probably going to have an ultrasonic fingerprint sensor based on these leaks. An ultrasonic fingerprint sensor is more expensive than an optical fingerprint sensor. And it's probably going to keep a lot of the same other technologies. I seriously doubt they're going to change up the camera sensors much. I bet you it's going to have the same charging speeds because no one's charging that much faster. Definitely not Samsung, Apple, or Google. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel on that. And they want to keep prices somewhat in check. But after a point, you also have to make money on the phone. You can't sell at like no margin forever. So the price is going to climb. I want to see the over under from people in this chat. Is it on day one? Do we expect, like, the second the embargo breaks, for a flood of tech blogger review channels who will never use the OnePlus seriously? They'll only use it with pre release software under embargo to shoot a review, and then they'll fixate on OnePlus is raising prices. The OnePlus is betraying their customers again. It's just betrayal. They're betraying us. Who would pay more for a OnePlus? And it's not going to be a feature for feature comparison. It's just going to be judging the value of the brand label like a purse. Is OnePlus allowed to charge more for a phone? Who I it's a OnePlus. A OnePlus should only be like $300. How much can a gallon of milk cost, Michael? Like $10? Here's some money. Go and see a Star War. But they're going to do that because they'll have to fill that kind of gap of content before Samsung will come out with the same phone they've sold for 4 years now. And OnePlus has never been more competitive. From the OnePlus Open to today, banger after banger after banger. Some of the best smartwatches that you can buy, really good earbuds. Their tablet is a monster. I've got the OnePlus Pad 2 right over there. The OnePlus 12 embarrasses phones like the Galaxy S24 Plus. Like, it's not close. It's really not a fair fight. And I cannot for the life of me, like, you literally come down to one feature. Do you need DeX? No. What are you doing buying a Samsung at those prices against the sales prices you can get for a 512 gig OnePlus 12? Because I'll tell you, it's pretty rough. The camera conversation, the media, the gaming, having fun things like a notification rocker and an IR blaster, like features on a phone. If you're not using DeX, like, you're kind of wasting a lot of money. It's an embarrassing comparison putting a OnePlus 12 up against an iPhone 16, not Pro, just a regular iPhone 16. Because sub $800, you can get the 512 gig version of the OnePlus 12 with 3 phenomenal camera sensors on the back. Can't do that on a OnePlus 16. I mean, not OnePlus. You can't do that on an iPhone 16. I'm getting all my brand names mixed up in my head because I am tired. So I don't know. What do we think? Is it the day one that people start talking about OnePlus being too big for their britches and charging too much for a phone, or do you think it goes a week? Like, do you think we'll finally get a bunch of reviews were like, hey, this is actually just a really good phone. This is a competitive option against a Pixel 9, Galaxy S24 Plus, one iPhone 16. This just deserves to be in the same conversation. And at a price savings, you get these features which beat similarly priced Apple and Google. Or if you're comparing, you can compare this phone against a more expensive Samsung or Pixel. Do you think we'll just get that? Because that would be a good reporting breakdown. When people say, like, oh, it's unbiased, that would just be the data that you would want. These features compare well against those features, and this price is lower than this price. That seems pretty straightforward to me, but whenever you bring up OnePlus, it always has to come with the baggage of they used to only be the cheapest phones with good chips, and now they're more expensive. I've been betrayed. So I want us to keep track. Like, Jojo the Techie. Jojo the Techie says, you won't get that from larger creators if you even get a video. Who can afford to make a video about a OnePlus? That doesn't make any sense. I only make money on videos saying good things about apples and galaxies. So I guess I just can't make a video about a OnePlus. They've got bigger fish to fry. I love it. I love it. From Aditi Anil, day one, but I'm genuinely hopeful. The near universal praise for the iPhone wasn't there for the 16 series. I think we're seeing a slow but definite change in trends. Diago, OnePlus being competitive? Have you stopped taking your meds, Juan? Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, Dave Burns, unfortunately, Dave Burns says, "Do people still watch those channels?" And decreasingly. That's what sucks. Is like the popularity hype beast trend of influencer tech channels is in waning popularity. You're looking at people hosting those channels trying anything they can to make money on other ventures because they're not making the same kind of cash they were. They're not getting the same viewership. They're not getting the same reactions to their videos. They're still held up as these like, you know, influential influencers with these huge subscriber bases. But even for them, maybe a channel with 20 million subs gets like 2 million hits on a video. That's not good. That's not growing tech as a conversation. That's not growing tech as a hobby. And they're sucking all the air out of the smaller viewership that's left, but we're not adding new people. We're not bringing more people up. It's getting harder and harder to kind of scale back and find the nerds again. It's kind of crazy to me. Like when I was super into like PDAs, people would make fun of me because like, why do you even need that? That's such a stupid gadget. It's really expensive. Oh my gosh. And like, you can't be without your email for a couple hours. What's wrong with you? And then everyone kind of took off on iPhones and smartphones. But we started thinking that like the population was going to get tech savvy and actually be interested in the tools that they use to get their job done. But it's kind of like cars, right? There are hardcore enthusiasts. There are people that are just sort of vaguely aware of what's in their car and what parts of a car do what and how their car works. And then there's a huge population of people that just don't care, right? It gets them from point A to point B. And in tech, I feel like that window of people who just don't care, they're exhausted by having to buy tech, they are constantly distracted, they actually kind of hate their phones and laptops and tablets, and they're recognizing like this is killing, you know, all of the fun and joy out of our kids in school and stuff. I think that population is enormous. And there are these tiny little slivers of tech savvy consumers who actually care about knowing some of what goes on in their phone. And then an even smaller slice of that are the hardcore nerds like us that really dig into the nuts and bolts and want to see some of this stuff played out and discussed and embraced. So unfortunately, Dave, like the viewership is still a larger percentage goes to those big broad channels that are very shallow in their coverage. Um, but instead, I feel like the hardcore nerds are just not engaging at all. They'll be hardcore nerds and maybe they'll pop up on a Mastodon and leave a couple comments on stuff from time to time, but they're not regularly consuming anything because all of it's garbage. All of it's algorithmic, you know, hype bait. So it's kind of a bummer. Anyway, I think the OnePlus 13 is going to end up being one of the best phones sold in North America. And I expect that it will be a little more expensive than the OnePlus 12. And you're kind of dumb if you buy any phone brand new, full price, day one, full MSRP. Have a trade in, wait for a sale. Without a trade in, you can get the OnePlus 12 for $750. And it's going to run circles around the Pixel 9 Pro in a bunch of games and applications and content creation pieces. It's going to get better battery life. It's going to have faster charging and it's going to have competitive camera sensors against the Pixel. You could just do that. OnePlus 12, if Google is the harbinger, Google is the keeper of Android, and they say this is what an Android experience should look like, then the Pixel 9 Pro XL is going to have to fight the OnePlus 12 and the OnePlus 13 for an entire year. And you could pick up a OnePlus 12 today and be perfectly competitive and better in a number of areas than the Pixel 9 Pro XL. And you can buy it without a trade-in for $750. So what do we have to do to get a Pixel 9 Pro XL down to $750? It's not an oranges to oranges fight, and I don't think Google's on the winning side of this one. So it's pretty tough. Brian Glaze, I don't do it for the money, except when I do it for the money. Big time content creators. Nick Gay, should I switch to the OnePlus 12 from Samsung S23 Ultra? Can you give me a list? Nick Gay, I mean, again, hit me up on the Patreon. We can chat all that stuff out, but I don't know. It depends on what you care about, and I'm not just gonna spec regurgitate everything I know about those two phones. But again, I always kind of hold, if what you're using currently is getting the job done and you like using it, then wait as long as you can. Wait until the wheels fall off and you need to buy something. And I feel like you get a much better return on your investment if you buy a phone unlocked on a sale a couple months after it comes out, and then you can use that phone for as long as you possibly can. I think you actually get a pretty poor return on your investment now when, like, you try to cycle every year because you're worried that you're not going to get good trade-in values. When you really run these phones and you see, oh dang, a phone from like 4 years ago is perfectly competitive today. You could have a OnePlus 8 Pro today, and that phone would still largely offer a similar, not as nice, but a similar experience to what we use on cutting edge phones. It's pretty close. Where you get into those particulars, and if you want to hit me up on the Patreon and you want to chat, when you get into those specifics, then you can kind of weed out, oh, I actually am looking for a more significant bump in CPU performance, or I am looking for these specific kinds of camera capabilities. And that nuance matters. That does motivate a purchasing recommendation. But if it's still like, hey, like, I surf social media and I take a couple snapshots of my kids, and I, like, depend on this as a communications tool. I don't know. They're all kind of the same. It only matters if you have specific things that you care about. And then you can make a more informed purchasing decision. It's rarely going to be Apple or Samsung that win those kinds of direct informed purchasing considerations. It's like saying, GM or Ford. Well, yeah, but I need this, this, and this. Oh, well, in that case, you need a Honda. It's like Apple or Samsung, but I kind of want this fast charging. Oh, I guess Moto, right? That's what matters. And it's like knowing that matters. If that matters to you, then it matters, and then you can make a more informed purchasing decision. Brian Glaze, the one clear victory I'll give the Pixel is software communication features like call screening. I agree. And there have been improvements. I'm not trying to say that the Pixel, I have a review. You can read my Pixel 9 Pro XL review on patreon.com/somegadgetguy. There have been improvements. And in fact, going from Pixel 8 Pro to 9 Pro XL, there are some things that are nicer. And if you absolutely need call screen, then the price you will pay for that is hundreds of dollars more than a similarly configured OnePlus 12. That's what it's going to charge. That's what it's going to cost you. I like, at some point, the feature disparity has to matter. And I do believe, I still wholeheartedly believe, just like I believe for the Pixel 8 Pro and the Pixel 7 Pro and the Pixel 6 Pro, software should have an impact on the price. You come up with a really cool software feature, you should be able to charge more for your product. But you have to frame that. So going from the Pixel 6 Pro, which was in OnePlus price territory, to the Pixel 9 Pro XL, which is in ultra phone price territory, we have steadily increased the cost of that phone for consumers. And the phone has not scaled for performance, has not scaled as well for battery life, and is only in this iteration getting a little bit better for radio management. And it's still not as good as a Qualcomm chip for managing radio and power and performance with obnoxiously slow charging. But if you need call screen, that lobster pot effect now dictates that call screen as the victory feature for a Pixel is going to cost you hundreds of dollars more than a OnePlus 12. And I don't have a good alternative for people except to say, like, maybe you just need an A series. If you're not using the performance of a OnePlus 12, then why spend more on a Tensor, which is not going to perform as well as a Snapdragon, and go down to a mid-ranger? If you're not taxing your phone to the degree that a premium chip makes sense, you're also not really getting much for your money on a Tensor. Like, that all scales down. And so it kind of creates this funnel effect where maybe just wait for a Pixel 9a. See if the Pixel 9a has an updated radio. And if it does, I think that's actually a better bang for buck than a Pixel Pro. Maybe even like wait for a good sale on the Pixel 9. And if it has this, it's got this upgraded radio, maybe that's the better fit for your needs. I don't know. I have a hard time calling a phone a pro when it seems to struggle at doing any heavy lifting computing task against significantly cheaper solutions like the OnePlus 12. So it's pretty rough. Diago, the last time one used the LG G8, or was it the V50, to compare with the new phone, the G8 did everything the new phone did, although a bit slowly. So there is really no fundamental differences in the last years. There have been quality of life improvements for sure, but no leaps and bounds forward. So I can point to all of the things that have changed and gotten better. But also, we have to factor that in against all the things we've lost. Like, pick up an LG G8 and you had secure face unlock with fingerprint unlock, a premium audiophile grade headphone experience. You had great cameras. You had a higher resolution display and a smaller form factor. You had a memory card slot to expand storage. Like, you put all of that together, and the G8 is kind of a better phone than most of the phones we can buy today. But if you tell me you need hardcore mobile compute capabilities, man, a MediaTek or a Snapdragon today is going to be a significantly more powerful computer. Like, if you want to replace your laptop with something that fits in your pocket, we have chips that can do that. And they're in phones today. And they're really exciting if you're looking at the absolute best performance per watt compute capabilities that you can get. I don't know that that's what a lot of people are looking for on their phones. I keep trying to tell people they can do these things, and they keep telling me, shut up, nerd. So I don't know that that's the hook. I can pick up a Xiaomi or a Vivo and show you the more photographic capabilities of those camera sensors over a phone like the V50. Triple camera to triple camera, there are very few things I would ever want to turn to a V50 for creating content. Hilariously, the main thing I would pick up a V50 for today is not photography, but audio. Is like the V50 was really the last phone that didn't mess with my audio recording and give me stupid noise reduction and automatic gain. And I could set levels and I could set a limiter. And, I had hard button control over things like wind noise filtering and stuff like that. The V50 today is still a great phone to shoot 4K video because of how you can control your audio and your mics. The camera sensors, not that nice. Really not that nice compared to what we use today. The main camera on the V50 is the same size as the telephoto sensor on the Vivo X100. I like the camera sensors better on the Vivos and the Xiaomis. The audio sucks though. So again, it's like, what is it that we're doing with the phone? And we're using one stupid, simple word to try and encapsulate an incredibly huge market of different experiences. A smartphone, for some people, is literally just a thing they make phone calls on. A smartphone for other people could be something that they engage with email and text messaging. A smartphone for another person might be a primary gaming companion device, or it could be an artist's sketch pad or a notepad, or it could be a platform for productivity and getting work done. There is this incredible diversification of pocket computer experiences that all fit under this word phone. And I don't think we're doing a good job of dividing or acknowledging the spectrum of experiences out there. Because for most people, if we're going to play that stupid game of average consumers, there's very little that I would recommend for that Pixel experience, where that can't be satisfied by a Pixel 8a. If you're telling me you love the daylight HDR processing on the Pixel camera, Pixel 8a. You're telling me you like being able to, filter out calls and have this call screen. It's in the Pixel 8a. The Pixel 8a even has video out through the USB-C port if you want to hook it up to an external monitor and stream video or edit in LumaFusion. Like, it's all in the Pixel 8a. The downside would be is it's going to run a little hotter than a Pixel 9 with that newer modem from Samsung, but neither the 8A or the Pixel 9s are going to compete with MediaTek radios or Qualcomm radios. That Samsung radio isn't really getting it done. It's better. It's better than the radio that's in the 8A, but this is also like a ridiculously cheap phone to buy on most sales or through carriers. Like, what are you spending on? So if you're telling me you want all of these improved capabilities, these better photography capabilities, these better performance capabilities, the jump from an A series Pixel to a Pro series Pixel is really not that significant. But the jump from an A series Pixel to a Vivo X100 is enormous. That is a huge difference in a lot of these things that people say they think they care about. But ultimately, they still pick up their phone and they take an awkwardly sort of composed portrait shot of their kid out at the soccer field that no one will ever look at because it's a terrible photo. And that's how we kind of play that out. I've gone way long on all of this. Let me take one more drink of water. We can kind of poke through the last comments here in the chat, and then I've got to wrap this up, and we'll finish this out. Oh, Dave Burns, a boy can dream. Dave says, imagine if we got a super power efficient and okay gaming SoC. And I'd love to see like a 7 series really champion that, where I feel like we've had better examples of that in the past. The 765 wasn't great for gaming, and occasionally you could run into some stuttery issues when you were trying to keep a screen going at 120 hertz. But man, like a Pixel 5a was just a monster for battery life. My dad loves that Pixel 5a. Like, he's using that phone all day, every day. That thing is a champ. It's just a shame that we kind of walked away from that. Tech soiree. I'm definitely not going to buy a Samsung A15. Don't think many people should. Jimmy Fire Dragon is saying, yeah, I think us Pixel users are getting Android 15 tomorrow. I've been using Android 15 on my Vivo. So the Vivo X100 Pro has had Android 15. So suck it, Pixel nerds. How come you're always so late to getting updates? My Vivo with a 1-inch camera sensor, an amazing telephoto, and a really solid ultra wide that can all shoot 8K video without having to upload video to the cloud to get finished is already on Android 15. You're so 2000 and late, Pixel nerds. Ha ha! It's a bummer because I really like the Pixel hardware team and I want to see them competing better, but it really feels like Apple and Google and Samsung are all in this kind of coasting where as long as we all just make phones that look kind of the same, and as long as we kind of keep just coasting with the same hardware features, then people won't have a choice. They'll have to buy one samey phone from one of us. And and that's true in North America. So few people are looking at like a Motorola or a OnePlus. So where do you go? Do you buy the flat, rounded rectangle from Samsung? Or do you buy the flat, rounded rectangle from Apple? Or do you buy the flat, rounded rectangle from Google? Oh, but Android 15 is nice. I can't wait for Pixel fans to start using Android 15. It'd be really cool if they could finally get it. Oh, tangential tesseract. I picked up a cheap used iPhone XS recently just so I could play with iOS 18 to see the upgrades. It's way old by technology standards and still surprisingly fast. Could totally be a PC if it supported something like a Next dock. And I don't mean to pick on you because the iPhone XS was the last iPhone I ever purchased, and that broke my heart. The iPhone XS was one of the worst supported phones from Apple. It had the force pressing that was completely devalued and sort of written off in future iOS updates. It took two full iOS updates to get the revised camera layout. So you would have like cheap iPhones would get it, and then you'd be like, "But I have this $1,000 iPhone XS. What it's not getting this update, and I have a $300 Pixel that can do night sight photography, but you're telling me my iPhone XS is not powerful enough to do a night mode shot." It just it just killed me how poorly. And you're still totally correct. For one of the worst supported iPhones of all time, it's still a current device today. It still could be a good phone today. You could still do more with that phone if you could pair it with the right accessories and use it as more of like a computer kind of setup. Um, from Michael C. Pixel has I don't see. Michael C says Pixel had as every right to raise prices. Oh, I think you mean just Pixel had every right to raise prices, but doing so 2 years in a row definitely hurt them in the value proposition department. It was a lot easier to recommend a base model Pixel 6 or Pixel 7. And that's why I keep making that comparison where you're like, if you really compare this oranges to oranges, you're looking at more than 128 gig of storage, way too lean on a phone today, especially if you think you're really going to use those cameras. Um, I cannot grade the Pixel 9 the same way that I graded the Pixel 8. The Pixel 8 Pro went toe to toe with phones like the Galaxy S24 Plus. The Pixel 9 Pro XL is really doing battle against a Galaxy S24 Ultra. That is not a good fight for Google. I'm not the guy who says it should have been cheaper. The only thing I can say is if it's not a Apple or a Samsung, is it just needs to be the cheapest. I'm not that guy. I really feel you should charge appropriately for the features and the experience and all the things you bring to the table. But there are very few fights where someone who says they want to spend $1,200 on a phone, I'm looking at like an S24 Ultra versus a Pixel 9 Pro XL. Man, why are you spending over $1,000 on a phone? I kind of think Samsung actually has the better value proposition over $1,000 between those two. So I get it. You need to make money on the division. You need to make your product look premium and look comparable to iPhones because that status and that money and that market, that psychology, it makes a lot of sense. I understand. But I don't know that the Pixel 9 Pro XL was really the year to do this. I think this is the roughest time I've had in properly positioning who the Pixel Pro is right for. Pixel 9 makes a lot more sense to me. The eventual Pixel 9a, I think, is going to be a monster. Pixel 9 Pro is just tough, and I don't want it to be this hard trying to figure out how or when you should buy it. I mean, kind of, and other people are mentioning stuff like this in the chat and stuff like that. From Hard of Hearing, Pixel 8a or 8 Pro, but I really want a telephoto, Juan. Well, then I guess you got to go Pixel 8 Pro. I can't pronounce your name, Skrzekakikawikazal. I'm so sorry. I'm never gonna get your username. You could phonetically spell it for me every single time. Vivo OG. Kapakash, are you disappointed that the X200 series don't have 1-inch sensors? I am very disappointed that the X200s are not going to have that 1-inch sensor. It is such a good camera sensor. I mean, like, there's so many things that I like about Vivos, and I'm sure it's going to be a great phone, but that to me feels like a step back. And I really hope that maybe the Ultra gets a better international distribution. That'd be great. But the X200 Pro in some ways looks like a combination of cost savings. Like, how can we reasonably achieve some of the same performance, but we know that the SoC is going to be even more expensive. So if we go from a 1-inch sensor to like a 1/1.3, but we give it a wider aperture, maybe that's going to look good enough and that'll be fine. And we'll save money on this camera stack because the chip got more expensive and ultrasonic fingerprint sensors and blah, 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 blah. And bigger batteries, because we'll all need bigger batteries with these more powerful chips. It's kind of a bummer. Can't lie, it really is. Jojo the Techie from the top rope. Dang. Let's see. Tangentially Tesseract. 100% agree about the missing 10S updates. That's why I don't mainstream anything from Apple. I just feel like I don't have a right to criticize them fully if I don't touch their stuff once in a great while. I'm kind of the same way. I actually play with a lot of Apple gear. I just choose not to talk about it on my channel because I don't want anything as part of my commentary to be in any way exposing Apple as an idea to consumers. It's my one little protest. But I mean, I try to still use this stuff so I can kind of know what's going on with them, and I'm rarely impressed. Get that out of the way there. So, I think we need to wrap this up. I've gone a whole half hour here, and I need to go check and make sure everything's okay with my wife. She yelled up, "I'm okay." But lots of stuff coming out. I've got videos in the pipeline. I lift an embargo on something tomorrow morning that I'm very excited. I'm very happy to talk about. It's just a fun little accessory thing. It's not a huge earth-shaking, product announcement, but I think it's just something kind of fun. And I still have reviews. So a lot of reviews are going to be going to the Patreon first for the Acasis, for some audio tech. There's another thing here. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to talk about that yet. I have a laptop over here that is a really practical idea on a business laptop. And it reminds me a little of an LG Gram, but it's built way better in a practical way. But perhaps I've said too much. So anyway, some really cool things that again, we have the time to kind of explore and diversify and not just get kind of focused in on one phone review because that's all we can talk about this week because that's the big announcement. So I hope everybody's along for the ride. Stuff is going to be going to the Patreon first, patreon.com/somegadgetguy. And on top of that, this Friday, we're going to do another movie stream with some sci-fi horror, some hell dimension. It's going to be real good. This is a patron request movie for our spooky movie season. So definitely be looking out for that. And follow up with all of the other people that are streaming throughout the week. We've got Gadget Goddess on Tuesdays. We've got Eric, the Tech Preacher, on Wednesdays. I think someone's going to be filling in on Thursdays. I don't know if Michael Peppertech is yet. LaShawn on Fridays. We've got El Jefe and Nomad. And I'm missing people over the weekend. DTNL. HoloLens 3 pre-release video? I wish. Oh, how awesome would that be if like Microsoft went out of all the channels on the internet to release the HoloLens 3, we'll talk to Juan. How great. That'd be hilarious. Oh man, that'd be good. Okay, so everybody have a great week. We're gonna have some fun this week. I mean, I'm really feeling it. This is gonna be a fun week. So Slang. Thank you, Kapakash. Sam and Joe and Slang over the weekend too. I always forget Digital Slang, and I like his streams. I end up being a part of the replay crew because I never catch them when he streams. So I want you to have an awesome week. I want you to do awesome with your technology. I want you to be awesome with your technology. And I'll catch all of you back here next Monday for another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. Be safe. There is crazy stuff happening around the world. There's crazy weather and hurricanes and earthquakes and tornadoes. And keep your head down. Take care of yourself so you can continue being a good tech neighbor for others. I'll catch you back.